Welcome to the Podcast Marketing Magic live training webinar. This is your host, Seth Green. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a few minutes. We are going to go ahead and get started. This is Seth Green, your host of today's Podcast Marketing Magic training session. So you are about to discover how to get impossible to reach decision makers to seek you out. Wouldn't that be nice, right? How to write a book without actually having to write a book, and how 20 minutes a week can get 20 people referring you business. So let's dive right in. You are about to discover the exact process I used to accomplish all three of those objectives, and that we have been implementing for our clients for about the last 6 months with great results, which is why we're now making it available to you. So why podcasting? I don't want to assume that everybody knows what a podcast is. So a podcast is like a radio show on your phone. Why would you want a radio show on your phone? Well, first of all, a lot more people are listening to podcasts, to radio shows on their phone now. The downfall of having a radio show in, let's say, a local market is A, it's really expensive, and B, it's not very targeted. If I said I want a radio show just in front of business owners, who are my ideal clients, the radio station would say, well, you better bring the audience of business owners then. You better buy a bunch of ads on our show, and it's going to take a while to build up that audience. You can do that on a podcast in front of exactly the right people for a tiny, tiny percentage of the cost that it would cost you. I have some friends who have been very successful with their terrestrial radio show, but they spend $60,000 a year on it, and they've been doing it for 15 years. If you think about that, that's almost $1 million they've spent on their radio show. So unless you want to spend $1 million, podcasting is the way to go. I also have a top-rated podcast, Direct Response Marketing, which I'd love to have you listen to at ultimatemarketingmagician.com/podcasts. You will see there some of my favorite interviews. I've interviewed people like Roland Frazier, Russell Brunson, Perry Marshall, Dan Kennedy, Ivan Meisner, Alex Mendozian, some of the household names in our industry, because I've got a podcast. So you'll learn some great marketing and business advice from them, and it's free, so why not? Why is now the right time to be doing podcasting in the first place? What you're looking at right here is Apple's CarPlay. So Apple signed a deal, and they spent billions and billions of dollars to get a deal with almost every major car manufacturer, so that going forward over the next 5 years, the next car you buy, this is what your dashboard will look like. And that little purple icon in the middle is Apple's podcast interface. It's a native app, which means you cannot, those apps on your phone you can't delete. That's a native app. This will be a native app to your car. So even if you don't have an iPad, iPod, iPhone, or iMac, you will have an iCar whether you like it or not. So the next new car you buy, not new used car, over the next 5 years, will have the podcast interface built in. Right now, there are 1 billion people listening to podcasts, and due to Apple's influence in the car industry, over the next 5 years, that number is expected to triple. Now, the most used apps on your smartphone, other than social media, are iTunes, podcasts, and Amazon, which means if there's 3 billion people looking for what you do and you don't have a podcast and you don't have a book, how are they going to find you? They're probably not, especially when you consider 80% of searches now start on a mobile phone. They're not shopping on their desktop so much anymore. So that's why the time is now to take advantage of this. The original ground floor of podcasting was, 10 years ago when it first came out. But the real ground floor, in my opinion, is now that Apple's put all this money behind it to absolutely explode it. This is your chance. If you weren't doing it 10 years ago, and there weren't that many people listening to it, so it wasn't as valuable. But if you're doing it now, this is your chance. Who am I? Why should you listen to me? I am a 5-time best-selling author, and my 6th book, Podcast Marketing Magic, that you signed up to get a free download of, is soon to be published by Morgan James Publishing. So you will soon see me in Barnes & Noble, which I'm really excited about. I have 5 other best-selling books, and I am fortunate enough to be the only person in history who's ever been nominated by Dan Kennedy, that happy-looking guy to my right, for his prestigious Marketer of the Year award 3 years in a row, back to back to back. I've also been interviewed and featured on real media like the Wall Street Journal, CBS, CNN, NBC, Fox, Boston Globe, Miami Herald, and those were real media appearances as opposed to paid media. But it didn't always start out that way. I did not start out as a podcast marketing expert. I went to Syracuse University. I was an Orangeman. And at 18, my life goal was to be a Broadway star. You sort of see how that worked out. And I'll tell you why in a second. I went to Syracuse University for acting. That was what my original undergraduate degree, my first undergraduate degree was in. I was going to be a Broadway star until my senior year, when 2 of my friends and I got the brilliant idea that we wanted to produce a musical. And that musical was an interactive murder mystery musical called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And what happened was we started a student organization. We came up with a budget. We went to the Student Government Association of Syracuse University, presented our proposal, and they approved it and gave us our budget, and we were off to the races. And I was a producer, and everything was great. Until it wasn't. Until the day we got a phone call from SGA saying you need to come in and talk to us. I apologize, Mark, if we're echoing a bit. That is weird. Do you possibly have me on more than both the webinar and on your phone or someplace else? Let me know. So SGA said we need to talk. And that is never a good phone call to get. If your girlfriend says we need to talk, she usually wants to be friends. She doesn't want to be your girlfriend anymore. If your wife or your spouse or your husband says we need to talk, usually there's a problem. And usually if your boss says we need to talk, it's not because they're giving you a raise. So SGA said we made a mistake. The bylaws of Syracuse University prohibit us from giving a first-year student organization that much money. We need half your budget back. And I said, well, we're 6 weeks from opening night. You can't have it back. We're using it. And they said, oh, no, you don't understand. We're not asking you. We're telling you. We already took the money from your student government bank account. We're just letting you know. So if you check your balance tomorrow, you don't think you got robbed. So my friends and I went back to my apartment and said, what are we going to do now? We tried to figure out a way to produce the show on half the budget, but we couldn't. So we were thinking about closing the show. And I don't know what I was going to do with all the sets that had been built. But then I got this idea. So if you've ever seen the movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise, you'll know that this guy, the Admiral, says a line to him in the movie. He says, "Son, your ego's writing checks your body can't cash." And that's what I did. I got this brilliant idea. I said, "Guys, I have all these pre-approved credit card applications in my pile on my dining room table. Why don't I just fill them out and maybe fudge the numbers a little bit and charge the show, and we'll sell tickets and whatever, and we'll make the money back that way." And they said, "Well, that's great, but what happens if we don't sell enough tickets?" I said, "Then you guys each get credit cards and we split it 3 ways." And they said, "Okay, that sounds like a great idea, Seth. You should do it." So I did it. But I didn't know anything about marketing. So we didn't sell very many tickets. So I went back to my friends at the end of the year and said, "Guys, we're about to graduate. You got to go get credit cards and take your third of our debt." And they then went to their parents and said, "Hey, mom and dad, can we do this?" And their parents, of course, said no, which is what my parents would have said had I asked, which is why I didn't ask, because I didn't want them to talk me out of it, because I wanted to produce the show and be a big shot. And so my friend said, "Sorry, can't help you." And I got screwed and was left holding the bag for all of the money. And I couldn't pay it back. I had no way to pay it back. And I had to go Chapter 7. I had to go bankrupt. And, worst day of my life, right? Sitting in bankruptcy court, and the trustee looks down, his, glasses at me, and says, "I don't understand. It says in your application that this was for a musical. Explain that." So I told him what happened. And he said, "You spent all this money on a musical?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I've been doing this 20 years. I thought I had seen everything, but this is a first for me. I've never seen this before. Can't wait till happy hour. I'm going to go tell all the other trustees about it." I said, "Well, I'm glad this is amusing to you, but this is my life." So I went bankrupt, and I realized I had borrowed a bunch of money to gamble on something essentially I knew nothing about. So I think a good career choice, maybe I shouldn't be a producer, maybe I shouldn't be an actor. I'll go be a financial advisor. I'll tell people not to do this. That will be my financial advice. So great career choice. Logical, totally logical. So I went to work for a Fortune 500 financial services company, and there were 6,700 advisors at that company, and I was one up from the bottom because my branch manager said, "I got a book for you where all your clients are going to come from your whole career." And I got super excited. I'm 20 something. I'm like, "Man, I'm going to go get a Ferrari. I'm going to go get a killer stereo system and a great TV. This is awesome. Give me the book." And he literally puts the phone book on his desk, literally the yellow page, white pages, yellow pages, and says, "Go get them, Tiger. They're all in there." So that's what I did. I didn't know any better. I made 300 cold calls a day, every day for years, banging my head against a wall. Until one day in my spare time, I am a professional magician, and I was reading a magic trade journal. And there was a full-page ad for a marketing course for magicians. I didn't have the money. I was making cold calls. So I went to my parents and I said, "Mom and Dad, can you buy this for my birthday?" And they said, "Sure." So I used other people's money again to get the course. I implemented the course. And within 30 days, I was the highest priced, busiest magician in Western New York where I live. And it wasn't based on being a better magician. It was because I learned how to do direct response marketing. So I went back to the guy who sold me the course and said, "Oh my God, this stuff really works. Where did you learn it? Would this work in my real job?" He said, "Yes, it'll work in your real job. And I learned it from Dan Kennedy." So I went to Dan Kennedy and I told him, "I'm making 300 cold calls a day." And he said, "You shouldn't be. Your manager is wrong. Write me this really big check and I'll change your life." His pitch was better than that, but I'm shortening it for the purposes of this webinar. So I went home to my wife, because at this point I was married. And I said, "Honey, 12 months ago, we got married. 9 months ago, we bought our first house. 3 months ago, we had our first baby, our son, Max. And 3 weeks ago, you literally quit your job." She had just quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom, leaving me the sole breadwinner while I'm making 300 cold calls a day. And I said, "I need to go get all this money to hire this guy, Dan." And she said, "Didn't you tell me a story about you borrowing money once that didn't work out so well?" I said, "Yes, but this time it's different." And she said, "No." So I came home the next day and asked her the same question, and she gave me the same answer. And we repeated this pattern for 30 days in a row, with her answers getting more and more vehement until day 31, when she said, "You better pray this works." So I did a lot of praying, and then I hired Dan. And in the first 2 years, Dan increased my revenue 435%, and took me from the bottom of 6,700 advisors to the top 30 in the country for opening new accounts nationwide. So it worked really well. So I said, and my wife has stayed home ever since. I said, "Dan, this is amazing. What do I do now?" He said, "Start a marketing company and do this for other people." So I said, "Okay." And that started Market Domination LLC, which started out as just me and one client, and is now grown to an office building full of wonderful team members and hundreds of clients all over the world. Along the way, I wrote 5 other books. Besides the one you just got, I wrote Cutting Edge Marketing Magic, Real Estate Marketing Magic, Financial Advisor Marketing Magic, Online Marketing Magic, and the Facebook Ninja. So that's my story. Now let's talk about you. Let's talk about how podcasting is your freedom from wondering where your next referral is coming from, where your next client is coming from, and whether your marketing is working or not. This will help you overcome, the challenges that so many of us are facing as entrepreneurs or business owners, right? So I would, if you're, you should have your worksheet, your action guide next to you. Hopefully you got your action guide for the training session. If you do, you're going to start filling in the blanks right now, if you haven't been already. And if you don't, just take really good notes and I'll email you the action guide. If you have your action guide, a podcast is like a radio show on the phone. Number 2, CarPlay will cause the number of listeners to triple in the next 5 years. And we're on number 3 right now, which is iTunes is not a social network. iTunes is a media platform, And once you have a podcast on a media platform, as you'll see in number 4, that makes you a reporter. What do reporters do? Number 5, reporters interview people. They interview people. And that is part of the secret sauce. So if you're a reporter and you interview people, you can give everybody what Mary Kay of Mary Kay Makeup says they want more than money and sex is recognition and fame. So I'll show you some examples of how your podcast and being a reporter can achieve all of the goals we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So who can your podcast get you in front of? Well, this is the Outdoor Boardroom podcast by our client, Gary Okino, who's a golf coach. And when we met, he was charging $75 a lesson in Western New York for golf lessons. And because it snows a whole lot here in Buffalo, Gary could only work a certain number of months out of the year because the rest of the time it's snowing and there's no golf. So I said, we need to get you to warmer places and we need to get you in front of people who can pay a whole lot more than $75 for a lesson. So we created the Outdoor Boardroom podcast where Gary interviews Fortune 500 and really big company CEOs who golf. And they talk about the life lessons learned on the golf course, business lessons learned on the golf course. And 3 of Gary's magic questions that we wrote for him are, what's your biggest challenge in your golf game? What golf course is on your bucket list? And who do you want to play it with? No limits. Who do you want to play with? And let's say the CEO says, I have a bad slice. I want to play St. Andrews and I want to play with BJ Singh. So at the end of the interview, Gary says, would you open to me sending you some information on how you could fix your slice playing St. Andrews with BJ Singh? And the CEO goes, are you kidding? Oh my God, I would love that. So Gary sends him what I call a shock and awe box that talks about Gary's last golf lesson ever program for CEOs, where it's literally 6 figures a year because Gary picks up the CEO in a private jet, picks up BJ Singh in a private jet, pays BJ Singh his $30,000 appearance fee or whatever it is, and then flies to St. Andrews, first class. They play for a couple days and then come home. Now, not every CEO goes for $100,000 a year golf program, But the $100,000 program makes Gary's program where the CEO flies Gary to wherever they are for a couple days for $5,000 plus expenses seemed completely reasonable. And now Gary every month is posting pictures. He's in the Bahamas, he's in Aruba, he's in Florida, he's flying everywhere because the CEOs are paying him to do this. And if he tried cold calling a Fortune 500 CEO, you're never going to get through. There's 17 layers of bureaucracy and secretaries designed to prevent that. But if we do a direct response marketing campaign to their PR department about immediate appearance for the CEO, they respond. Because again, it's recognition and fame. On a local level, this is one of our clients who is an estate planning attorney, and he wanted referrals from CPAs and financial advisors. So normally, if he goes in and hands out a bit, says, "Hi, you don't know me, hand out my business card to your clients," they're going to laugh him out the door. But if he interviews them for his show and then turns it into a book and publishes the book and then says, "Hey, here's 2 copies of the book that you're in. Would you like to get some more to hand out to your clients? I'll sell them to you at cost. It's $3 a book." The CPA or the financial planner says, "Yeah, I'll take 200 of them. That'd be great." And then they hand them out to all their clients and prospects saying, "Look at me, I'm in a book. Richard Binko picked me to be in a book." And then those clients, when they need their wills and trusts done, go back to Richard Binko because he's the guy who wrote the book on the topic that their CPA just handed them. And they're buying more books every single month because they keep seeing new prospects. And they want to position themselves as the best CPA or the best financial planner, and being in a book is a great way to do that. Does your mind start to spin a little bit with how that could work in your business? Who are your centers of influence that you would want promoting you every week, handing out copies of your book, telling people all about you? Those are the people you should interview for your podcast and turn it into a book, and I'll show you how to do that. This is John Cito, a certified divorce financial analyst. He wanted referrals from New Jersey divorce lawyers, so we started a podcast and doing a book called New Jersey Divorce Experts, and now he's got 17 divorce lawyers sending him business, and they wouldn't give him the time of day before he interviewed them. This is my family, and that's my wife, Rebecca, and my kids, Ella, Lily, and Max. Max is 8, Ella is 6, Lily is 3. Obviously, they are the reason I do this, along with these are third world entrepreneurs that I have loaned money to start or grow their businesses so that they can get out of poverty through Kiva.org. I have helped 750 entrepreneurs thanks to our wonderful clients, and will help more thanks to you. We donate a percentage to Kiva. I'm not endorsed. I'm not telling you to go do Kiva. I don't make any money off of this. I just think that entrepreneurs are going to be the ones to raise the standard of living and help save the world. So I appreciate your help in doing that. So what are these steps to successful podcasting? You want to write these down. The first one is you need a podcast concept and a name. You saw examples right there: estate planning experts, New Jersey divorce experts, the outdoor boardroom. You need interview questions, and we'll talk about some of those in a minute. I gave you Gary's 3 magic questions. And then obviously you've got to book guests who are your ideal centers of influence. So if I go in the podcast store on iTunes and I type in personal branding, this is what comes up. iTunes ranks from left to right. So Life is a Marathon is the top podcast for personal branding. Now I'm going to show you a couple tricks on why it's number 1. Because even though the podcast is called Life is a Marathon, what is the real title? Life is a Marathon, life coaching, self-esteem, personal development, personal branding, positive thinking. And Bruce Van Horn's name is not Bruce Van Horn. It's Bruce Van Horn, life coach, speaker, thought leader, author, blogger, runner. Why is his name and his podcast name so long? Keywords, because he wants to rank for these keywords. Apple gives you all this room to name your podcast and name yourself. It's free space. Use it. Little tricks to rank in the iTunes podcast app store. You'll notice his keywords are also in his description, and they're in the description further along of every single episode. Now, I said a podcast was like a radio show on your phone, right? So what do radio shows have? Radio shows have an introduction. with a voiceover artist, an actor or actress doing the voiceover, not the show host themselves. And it's got music and it sounds like, the introduction to a radio show. So obviously you need one of those. But that intro should be strategic. It should be a lead generation ad for your podcast, telling them why they should listen to it. It should position you as the expert in your niche, and it should tell them what to do next. So even if they don't listen to the whole show, they know what to do. Do you want them to go to your website? Do you want them to follow you on Facebook? Do you want them to sign up for a free video series or a free consultation? So again, it should do all of that for them. Now, one of the biggest questions I get is the technology. I'm afraid of the technology. How do I do a podcast? The good news is we've eliminated all of the technology. You don't need any. All you need is an iPhone app that will record it. And it's free. You just pay for the airtime. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. So you record the interview and you get an introduction. So if this is the app store on my phone, if I type in call recorder, this is the second or third app. It's called Call Recorder Free. This is what it looks like. This is the one we use. It is free. You just pay for the minutes of airtime. So you might spend 10, 15 bucks a month at the most. It's really simple to use. This is what the app looks like when you open it. You have to buy credits, which is the airtime. So you hit the buy credit button and buy time. And then there's this big red record button. That's the only one you hit. It dials into the service. Then you hit the little add contact button down here. You pick the person you're going to interview. And then when they answer the phone, ask them if they're ready. Tell them, hey, I'm calling for the interview. Going to hit record and we're going to get started. They say, okay, you hit the merge call button and you're recording. And then when you're done, you hang up. And then the app will pop back open and say, you have a new recording available. What do you want to do with it? And you say, email it to Seth and his team so that they can edit it for me. You want to get again, the professionally produced introduction goes ahead of your show. The recording you just did, you splice them together or we do it for you. And that's your show. That's it. Then you have to get it hosted somewhere so that it gets to iTunes. There are a ton of different services for this. The one we use is called libsyn.com. I don't get paid for saying that. I'm not an affiliate. It's just really easy to use. Libsyn will then tell iTunes that you have a show. And every time you upload an episode to Libsyn, it automatically shows up on iTunes, which you're going to do every episode you do. Then I mentioned, I showed you earlier some examples of some books. You've got to transcribe each episode and then edit that transcription, and that is your book. Obviously, you need more than just the interviews to make a book. You're going to want like an introduction to the book, a couple chapters about you, why you're fabulous, your story, why not everybody who does what you do is the same, why they should pick you, what your offer, what your lead generation offer is, if you've got one, and a conclusion, and that's your book. And then, we'll publish it for you. My publishing company, we publish in-house so that, again, we don't charge any markup on books. We can do it for $3, $4 a book, depending on how many you buy, because we want you and everyone in the book to buy as many copies as possible, to get your message out to as many people as possible, to get you as many referrals as possible. Hopefully that makes sense. Now the multi-step, multimedia direct response marketing campaign to those decision makers, to those centers of influence, to get them to participate, that is the secret sauce. Now, if you went to Dan Kennedy, I'll tell you how much that costs in a minute. We also have a direct mail campaign that goes from you to your guests after they do the show and do the book to get them to promote it. And then we also write a campaign that goes from each guest in their voice to their clients, telling them, here's your book that I'm in. I wanted to share this with you. Here's why. Here's who's in it. Here's what Mark is doing and what Mark is all about, so that the business comes back to you. Now, if you wanted all three of those campaigns written for you and you hired Dan Kennedy to do it, if you hire Dan to write copy for you, he charges $100,000 plus royalties. But don't worry, I'm not going to make you pay what I paid. I wrote a campaign a month ago for some financial advisors who they wanted a 3-step follow-up campaign to a seminar that they were doing, and they paid $6,000 for it, and we're thrilled in terms of how much better it worked than what they were doing. And they had hired a previous copywriter to write that campaign for them and spent $3,000, but it didn't work. So even though we were more expensive, they ended up being happy because it worked. But don't worry, you won't pay 6, you won't pay 3. I'm actually going to give you all those campaigns for free. But first, I'm hoping that I'm inspiring you. I hope that you'll be our next success story, whether you start a podcast and turn it into a book yourself, or whether you want us to do it for you and do all the work. I hope to hear from you either way. And if all doing that does for you is get you in front of your dream referral sources and prospects, is it worth it? If all it does is get your book done or your next book done without you having to actually write it, is it worth it? If all it does is get you new customers, clients, and patients, is it worth it? I have to believe the answer to all 3 of those questions is yes. So I mentioned that we could do all the work for you. What that service entails is we create the podcast for you. We produce the professional introduction for you. We find the guests for you. We do the direct response multimedia marketing campaign you saw to those guests to get them to be on the show. We write the interview questions for you. We'll script it for you according to our proven psychological format that we've done over 40 podcasts. We'll edit the audio for you. We'll manage the submission process to iTunes, all done for you. Then we will transcribe and edit every episode. We'll do the graphic design, layout, and publishing of your book. We will market and promote the book. We will provide marketing materials to go to the interview subjects in the book and for them to send out to their clients, customers, and patients, all to drive a ton of business your way, all done for you. Now, we normally charge $9.97 a month for the podcast, but for this presentation as a marketing test, we are doing it for half off, which means $4.97 a month gets you the podcast. If you want the podcast and the book done for you, we normally charge $2,000 a month. Again, it is 50% off for this promotion. It would be $9.97 a month for 4 months, and that would get you a podcast and a book. And if you in 12 months, you'll have a ton of new business. Oh, I see we got a question coming in. Why 4 months? Oh, because if you're doing 1 interview a week, on average, it takes somewhere between 10 and 20 interviews to make a book, depending on how long your interviews go for. So it's a 4-month commitment because by then you'll have your book done. You can do it faster, but that's the average that we've seen our clients. It takes about 4 months to get enough interviews for the book to be done. Obviously, you're going to get stuff along the way because you're interviewing these people and building relationships with them. But obviously, the real chunk of business comes when they're all handing out your book. So that is why it is a 4-month commitment. Good question. I will also throw in a couple killer bonuses. I will give you 1 month free of working with the company that provides our virtual assistant team. So you will get 10 hours of virtual assistant time to use whatever you want. You can use it for social media. You can use it for blog posts. You can use it for research. You can have them do whatever you want the first month for free because of your relationship with us. And I will also throw in, I teach a monthly marketing mastermind group every month for 2 to 3 hours where I share not only this, but I share our cutting edge marketing. Everything that's working for us and our clients, I share with that mastermind group. For them to implement in their businesses. And we do that. It's $2,364. I will give you a year's worth of access to that mastermind group, to the videos for free as a bonus. If you sign up at podcastmarketingmagic.com/done for you. That is podcastmarketingmagic.com/done for you. I will put that link in the chat box. So that is, hopefully I've inspired you to do a podcast, think about it a little bit differently and turn it into a book and generate a ton of referrals from it. I'm going to open it up for more questions and answers. Type them in the chat box, please. Okay, other questions. Oh, I see a couple coming in. I am a financial advisor. As you started out, can I get this through my compliance department? Yes, we actually have quite a few financial advisors doing this. The reason it'll get approved by your compliance department is they can approve the questions in advance because we'll provide them to you, and they can approve the transcript of every interview in it before it's aired or before it gets published. They may object to the podcast part, They may not let you host it on iTunes. It may have to be just on your website, where you can restrict people's ability to comment. But we've got a number of advisors doing it already. So yes, you can use it if you're a financial advisor. We have not had compliance be an issue. I am a pediatric dentist. How would this work for me? Pediatric dentist. Okay, so the people you would probably interview, the first 20 interviews, I would assume would be probably the top 20 pediatricians in your city. And then that book would be called something like Raising Healthy Kids, and written by you, featuring the pediatricians. And then they would all hand it out to all their moms, all their patients, all the parents. And quite a few of those obviously are going to come back to you for their kids' pediatric dentistry. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any others. Okay. Awesome. I hope I've inspired you. I hope to see you at podcastmarketingmagic.com/done for you. Thank you so much for attending, and I look forward to seeing your success story. Podcastmarketingmagic.com/done for you. Thanks so much.